Chapter 29. The Dream. It became down to this, said Hermione, rubbing her forehead. Either Mr. Crouch attacked Victor or somebody else attacked both of them when Victor wasn't looking. It must have been Crouch, said Ron at once. That's why he was gone when Harry and Dumbledore got there. He had done a runner. I don't think so, said Harry, shaking his head. He seems really weak. I don't reckon he was up to disappearing or anything. You can't disappear on the Hogwarts ground. Haven't I told you enough times? Said Hermione. Okay, how's this for a theory? Said Ron excitedly. Grum attacked Crouch. No, wait for it. And then stand himself. And Mr. Crouch evaporated, did he? Said Hermione coldly. Oh yeah. It was daybreak. Harry, Hermione, and Ron had crept out of their dormitories very early and hurried up to the owlery together to send a note to Cyrus. Now they were standing looking out at the misty ground. All three of them were puffy-eyed and pale because they had been talking late into the night about Mr. Crouch. Just go through it again, Harry, said Hermione. What did Mr. Crouch actually say? I have told you he wasn't making much sense, said Harry. He said he wanted to warn Dumbledore about something. He definitely mentioned Bertha Jorkins, and he seemed to think she was dead. He kept saying stunning was his fault. He mentioned his son. Well, that was his fault, said Hermione testily. It was out of his mind, said Harry. Half the time he seemed to think his wife and son were still alive. And he kept talking to Percy about work and giving him instructions. And remind me what he said about you know who, said Ron tentatively. I have told you, Harry repeated dully. He said he is getting stronger. There was a pause. Then Ron said in a falsely confident voice, but he was out of his mind. Like you said, a half of it was probably just raving. He was sanest when he was trying to talk about Voldemort, said Harry, and Ron winced at the sound of the name. He was having real trouble stringing two words together. But what was when he seemed to know where he was and know what he wanted to do? He just kept saying he had to see Dumbledore. Harry turned away from the window and stared up into the rafter. The many perches were half empty. Every now and then another owl would swoop in through one of the windows, returning from its night's hunting with a mouse in its beak. If Snape hadn't held me up, Harry said bitterly, we might have got there in time. The headmaster is busy, Potter. What's rubbish, Potter? Why couldn't he just got out of the way? Maybe he didn't want you to get there, said Ron quietly. Maybe, hang on. How fast do you reckon he couldn't gotten down to the forest? Do you reckon he couldn't have beaten you and Dumbledore there? Not useless, he can turn himself into a bat or something, said Harry. Couldn't put it past him, Ron muttered. We need to see Professor Moody, said Hermione. We need to find out whether he found Mr. Crouch. If he had the Mordor's map on him, it would have been easy, said Harry. Unless Crouch was already outside the grounds, said Ron, because it only shows up to the boundaries, doesn't? Shh, said Hermione suddenly. Somebody was climbing the stairs to the owlery. You could hear two voices arguing, coming closer and closer. That blackmail. That is, he'll get into a lot of trouble for that. We have tried being polite. It's time to play dirty like him. He wouldn't like the Ministry of Magic knowing what he did. I'm telling you, if you put that in writing, it's blackmail. Yeah, and you won't be complaining if we get a nice fat payoff, will you? The owlery door banged open. Fred and George came over the threshold, then froze at the sight of Harry, Ron, and Hermione. What are you doing here? Ron and Fred said at the same time. Sending a letter, said Harry and George in unison. What at this time? Said Hermione and Fred. Fred grinned. Fine. We won't ask you what's going you're doing. If you don't ask us, he said. He was holding a sealed envelope in his hand. Harry glanced at it, but Fred, whether accidentally or on purpose, shifted his hand so that the name on it was covered. Well, don't let us hold up, Fred said, making a mock bow and pointing at the door. Ron didn't move. Who are you blackmailing? He said. Green vanished from the Fred's face. Harry saw George half glance at Fred before smiling at Ron. Don't be stupid, I was only joking, he said easily. Didn't sound like that, said Ron. Fred and George looked at each other, then Fred said abruptly, I have told you before, Ron, keep your nose out of you like it's shaved. It can't see why you don't would, but it's my business if you are blackmailing someone, said Ron. George's right. You could end up in serious trouble for that. Told you I was joking, said George. He walked over to Fred, pulled the letter out of his hand, and began attacking it to the leg of the nearest barn owl. It was staring to sound a bit like you are, dear old brother. You are wrong. Carry on like this, and you will be made a perfect. No, I won't, said Ron hotly. George carried the barn owl over to the window and it took off. George turned around and grinned at Ron. Well, stop telling people what to do then. See you later. He and Fred left the owlery. Harry, Ron, and Hermione stared at one another. You don't think they know something about all this, you know, Hermione whispered about Crouch and everything. No, said Harry. If it was something that serious, they had tell someone. They had tell Dumbledore. Ron, however, was looking uncomfortable. What's the matter? Hermione asked him. Well, said Ron slowly. I don't know if they would. They are obsessed with making money lately. I noticed it when I was hanging around with them. When you know, we aren't talking. Harry finished the sentence for him. Yeah, but blackmail. It's this joke shop idea they have got, said Ron. I thought they were only saying it to annoy mom, but they really mean it. They want to start one. They have only got a year left at Hogwarts. They keep going on about how it's time to think about their future and that can't help them and they need gold to get started. Hermione was looking uncomfortable now. Yes, but they wouldn't do anything against the law to get gold. Wouldn't they? Said Ron, looking skeptical. I don't know. They don't expect mind breaking rules, do they? Yes, but this is the law, said Hermione, looking scared. This isn't some silly school rule. They'll get a lot more than detention for blackmail. Ron, maybe you had better tell Percy. Are you mad? Said Ron. Tell Percy. He had probably do a crouch and turn them in. He stared at the window through which Fred and George Owl had parted, then said, Come on, let's get some breakfast. Do you think it's too early to go and see Professor Moody? Hermione said as they went down the spiral staircase. Yes, said Harry. He had probably blasted us through the door if we wake him at the crack of dawn. He'll think we are trying to attack him while he is asleep. Let's give it till break. History of Magic had rarely gone so slow. Harry kept checking Ron's watch, having finally discarded his own, but Ron's was moving so slowly he could have sworn it had stopped working too. All three of them were so tired they could happily have put their lid down on the desk and slept. Even Hermione wasn't talking her usual tone but was sitting with her head on her hand, gazing at Professor Beans with her eyes out of focus. When the bell finally rang, they hurried out into the corridor toward the dark art classroom and found Professor Moody leaving it in. He looked as tired as they feared. The eyelid of his normal eye was dropping, giving his face an even more lopsided appearance than usual. Professor Moody, Harry called as they made their way toward him through the crowd. Hello, Potter, growled Moody. His magical eye followed a couple of passing first years who sped up. Looking nervous, it rolled into the back of Moody's head and watched them around the corner before he spoke again. Come in here. He stood back to let them into his empty classroom, limped in after them, and closed the door. Did you find him? Harry asked without preamble. Mr. Crouch. No, said Moody. He moved over to his desk and sat down, stretched out his wooden leg with a silent groan, and pulled out his hip flask. Did you use the map? He said. Of course, said Moody, taking a swing from his desk. A leaf out of your book, Potter summoned it from my office into the forest. He wasn't anywhere on there, so he did disappear, said Ron. You can't disappear on the ground, Ron, said Hermione. There are other ways he could disappear, aren't there, Professor? Moody's magical eye quivered as it rested on Hermione. You're another one who might think about a career as an author. Told her, mind walk the right way, Granger. Hermione flushed pink with pleasure. Well, he wasn't invisible, said Harry. The map shone invisible purple. He must have left the ground then. But under his own steam, said Hermione eagerly, or because someone made him. Yeah, someone could have pulled him onto a broom and follow off with him. Couldn't they? Said Ron quickly, looking hopeful at Moody as if he too wanted to be told. He had the making of an horror. We can't rule out kidnap, crawling Moody. So, said Ron, do you reckon he is somewhere in Hogsmeade? Could be anywhere, said Moody, shaking his head. Only thinking we know for sure is that he is not here. He yawned widely so that his scarred stretched and his lobstick mouth revealed a number of missing teeth. Then he said, now Dumbledore told me you three fancy yourself as investigator, but there is nothing you can do for Crouch. The ministry will be looking for him now. Dumbledore notified them. Potter, you just keep your mind on the third task. What? Said Harry. Oh yeah, he hadn't given the mage a single thought since he had left it with Crumb the previous night. You'll be right up your street, this one, said Moody, looking up at Harry and scratching his scared and stubby chin. From the what the door said, you have managed to get through stuff like this plenty of time, work your way through a series of obstacles guarding the Sorcerer's Stone in your first year, didn't you? We helped, Ron said quickly. Me and Hermione helped, Moody grinned. Well, help him practice for this one, and I'll be very surprised if he doesn't win, said Moody. In the meantime, constant vigilance, Potter, constant vigilance. He took another long draw from his hip flask and his magical eyes rolled onto the window. The topmost sail of the Dumbledore ship was visible through it. You two concealed Moody, his normal eye on Ron and Hermione. You stay close to Potter, all right. I'm keeping an eye on things, but all the same, you can never have too many eyes out. Cyrus sent their owl back the very next morning. It fluttered down beside Harry at the same moment that a tawny owl landed in front of Hermione, clutching a copy of the Daily Prophet in his beak. She took the newspaper, scanned the first few pages, and said, she hasn't got wind of Crouch, then joined Ron and Harry in reading what Cyrus had to say on the mysterious event of the night before last. Harry, what do you think you are playing at? Walking off into the forest with Victor Crumb. I want you to swear by written owl that you are not going to go walking with anyone else at night. There is somebody highly dangerous at Hogwarts. It is clear to me that they wanted to stop Crouch from seeing Dumbledore, and you were probably feet away from them in the dark. You could have been killed. Your name didn't get into the goblet of fire by accident. If someone is trying to attack you, they are on their last chance. Stay close to Ron and Hermione. Do not leave Gryffindor Tower after hours. And arm yourself for the third task. Practice stunning and disarming. A few hexes wouldn't go miss either. There's nothing you can do about Crouch. Keep your head down and look after yourself. I am waiting for your letter giving me your words. You don't stray out of the bound again. Cyrus. Who is he to lecture me about being out of bound? Said Harry in mild indignation as he folded up Cyrus' letter and put it inside his robe after all the stuff he did at school. He is worried about you, said Hermione sharply, just like Moody and Hagrid. So listen to them. No one's tried to attack me all year, said Harry. No one's done anything to me at all, except put your name in the goblet of fire, said Hermione. And they must have done all for a reason, Harry. Sniffed it right. Maybe they have been biding their time. Maybe this is a task they are going to get you. Look, said Harry impatiently. Let's say Cyrus is right and somebody stunned Crumb to kidnap Crouch. Well, they would have been in the trees near us, would have they? But they waited till I was out of the way until they acted, didn't they? So it doesn't look like I am their target, does it? They couldn't have made it look like an accident if they have murdered you in the forest, said Hermione, but if you die during the task. They didn't care about attacking Crumb, did they? Said Harry. Why didn't they just polish me off at the time? They couldn't have made it look like Crumb and I had a duel or something. Harry, I don't understand it either, said Hermione desperately. I just know there are a lot of odd things going on and I don't like it. Mood is right, Cyrus is right. You have got to get in training for the third task straight away and you make sure you write that to Cyrus and promise him you are not going to go sneaking off alone again. The Hogwarts ground never looked more inviting than when Harry had to stay indoors. For the next few days, he spent all of his free time either in the library with Hermione and John, looking up fixes or yells in empty classroom, which they sneak into practice. Harry was concentrating on the stunning spell, which he had never used before. The trouble was that practicing it involved certain sacrifices on Ron's and Hermione's part. Can't we kidnap Mr. Norris? Ron suggested on Monday lunchtime in he lay flat on his back in the middle of the charm classroom, having there been stunned and revoked by Harry for a fifth time in a row. That stunned her for a bit. Or you could use Dobby. Harry, I bet he had do anything to help you. I'm not complaining or anything. He got gingerly to his feet, rubbing his backside, but I am aching all over. Well, you keep missing the questions, don't you? Said Hermione one impatiently. Rearingly a pile of questions they had been used for a catching spell. When Flitch had left in the cabinet, just try and fall backward. Once you are stunned, you can't aim too well, Hermione said Ron angrily. Why don't you take a turn? Well, I think Harry's got it now. Anyway, said Hermione hastily. And we don't have to worry about disarming because he's been able to do that for ages. I think we ought to start on some of these hexes this evening. He looked down the list they had made in the library. I think the look of one, she said, the impediment curse. She'll slow down anything that have trying to attack you. Harry, well, start with that one. Bell rang. They hastily shoved the cushion back into Flitwick's cupboard and slipped out of the classroom. "See you at dinner," said Hermione as she set off for Archimedes, while Harry and Ron headed toward North Tower and Deviation. Both stripped of dazzling gold sunlight fell across the corridor from the high window. The sky outside was so brightly blue it looked as though it had been enameled. "It's going to be boiling in Travan's room. She never put out of that fire," said Ron as they started up the staircase toward the silver ladder and the trapdoor. He was quite right. The dimly lit room was swelteringly hot. The ferns from the perfumed fire were heavily than ever. Harry's head swam as he made his way over to one of the curtains window, while Professor Trelawney was looking the other way, disentangling her shawl from the nape. He opened it an inch or so and settled back in his Clint's armchair so that a soft breeze played across his face. It was extremely comfortable. "My dear," said Professor Trelawney, sitting down in her winged armchair in front of the class and peering around at them all. With her strangled enlarged eyes, "we have almost finished our work of planetary deviation today, however, will be an excellent opportunity to examine the effect of Mars, for he is placed almost interestingly at the present time. If you will look this way, I will dim the light." She waved her wand and the lamp went out. The fire was the only source of light now. Professor Trelawney bent down and lifted from under her chair a miniature model of within a glass dome. It was a beautiful thing. Each of the moon gleamed in place around the ninth planet and the fiery sun, all of them hanging in their rear beneath the glass. Harry watched lazily as Professor Trelawney began to point out the fascinating angle Mars was making to Neptune. The heavily perfumed fumes wasn't over him, and the breeze from the window played across his face. He couldn't hear an insect humming gently somewhere behind the curtains. His eyelids began to drop. He was riding on the back of the eagle owl, soaring through the clear blue sky towards an old ivy-covered house set high on the hillside. Lower and lower they flew, the wind blowing pleasantly in Harry's face until they reached a dark and broken window in the upper story of the house and he entered. Now they were flying along a gloomy passageway to a room at the very end. Through the door they went into the dark room whose windows were boarded up. Harry had left the owl's back. He was watching now as it fluttered across the room into the chair with its own back to him. There were two dark shapes on the floor beside the chair. Both of them were sitting. One was Hugh Snake, the other was a man, a short, blinding man. A man with watery eyes had a pointed nose. He was wheezing and sobbing on the hearthrug. "You are in luck, Wormtail," said a cold, high-pitched voice from the depth of the chair in which the owl had landed. "You are very fortunate indeed. Your blunder has not ruined everything. He is dead." "My lord," gasped the man on the floor, "my lord, I'm so pleased and so sorry." "Nagini," said the cold voice, "you are out of luck. I will not be feeding Wormtail to you after all, but never mind, never mind. There is still Harry Potter." The snake hissed. Harry could see it fluttering. "Now," Wormtail said, cold voice, "perhaps one more little reminder why I will not tolerate another blunder from you." "My lord, no, I beg you." The tip of a wand emerged from around the back of the chair. It was pointed at her Wormtail. "Crucio," said the cold voice. Wormtail screamed as though very nerve in his body were on fire. The screaming filled Harry's ear as the scar on his forehead seared with pain. He was yelling too. Voldemort would hear him, would know he was there. Harry, Harry, Harry opened his eyes. He was lying on the floor of Professor Trelawney's room with his hands over his face. His scar was still burning so badly that his eyes were watering. The pain had been real. The whole class was standing around him, and Ron was kneeling next to him, looking terrified. "You are right," she said. "Of course he isn't," said Professor Trelawney, looking thoroughly excited. He grunted. Eyes loomed across Harry, gazing at him. "What was it, Potter? A premonition? An apparition? What did you see?" "Nothing," Harry lied. He sat up. He could feel himself shaking. He couldn't stop himself from looking around into the shadow behind him. Voldemort's voice had sounded so close. "You were clutching your scar," said Professor Trelawney. "You were rolling on the floor, clutching on your scar. Come now, Potter. I have experience in this matter.